From being a Hollywood star turned president, to being the first to serve non-consecutive terms, and even being the first president to have electricity in the White House. This is every US presidential first, and it gets more surprising with each president. Let's begin with the nation's founding father, George Washington. This is the man who defined what the American presidency ought to be. The young nation bestowed its hopes on him and elected him unanimously twice. And he repaid that confidence by carrying the weight of a new nation and turning ideals into institutions. He created the first cabinet and, most importantly, stepped down after 2 terms, a selfless act that established the peaceful transfer of power as a core American value. Next in the office was John Adams, who became the first president to live in the White House. Then came Thomas Jefferson, who became the first president to be inaugurated in 1801 in the brand new capital of Washington, D.C. This was a symbolic beginning for a young republic that was ready to define its future. He also holds the record for being the first president to significantly expand U.S. territory following the Louisiana Purchase from France in 1803. Then, under the leadership of James Madison, the U.S. confronted its first declared war. This is after he formally requested Congress to proclaim war against Great Britain. This move was informed by rampant maritime grievances as well as increased British interference with American sailors. This bold move by Madison was seen as a significant precedent of the president's role as commander-in-chief and affirmed the constitutional checks that govern that role. James Monroe then came in during a period when America was transitioning from war to progress. As such, he became the first U.S. president to travel by steamboat in 1817 during his Goodwill Tour, which aimed to inspect military defenses and foster national unity in the wake of the war. The story then advances to John Quincy Adams, who became the first president whose image was captured in a photograph, a daguerreotype produced by Philip Haas in Washington, D.C. Being the son of John Adams, he was also the first president who was a son of a former president. When Andrew Jackson rose to power, he redefined what it meant to be president. He was also the first president to win due to his popularist movement known as Jacksonian democracy, which aimed to give ordinary Americans a louder political voice. Yet, despite empowering the citizens, he was always a step away from danger. As he was leaving a funeral at the U.S. Capitol in 1835, a deranged house painter named Richard Lawrence aimed 2 pistols at Jackson. Luckily, both misfired. Without hesitation, the aging president, then in his late 60s, turned and struck his attacker repeatedly with his cane. Then a new chapter opened with Martin Van Buren, who set the record as the first president born of a citizen of the United States, as well as the only one whose first language was Dutch. Next at the helm was William Henry Harrison, who became the first president to deliver the longest inaugural address and, unfortunately, also became the first president to die in office, when he passed on just 31 days after inauguration. His death forced the young republic to confront its first real test of presidential succession. The near crisis brought about by Harrison's death was resolved by none other than John Tyler, who became the first president to assume office following the death of an incumbent in office. In the process, he resolved a constitutional ambiguity and set a precedent that once a president dies, the vice president assumes the full powers and title of president of the U.S., and not merely acting as a temporary placeholder. Moving ahead, James K. Polk became the first and only president to have served as Speaker of the House before ascending to the Oval Office. Zachary Taylor then came and won the election in 1848. You might ask, what's the first there? Well, the guy had never held elected office before. He was a military general who graduated to commander-in-chief in one move. When Millard Fillmore assumed occupancy of the White House, he became the first president to send an official mission to Japan, a bold move at a time when the island nation had been closed to the outside world for over 2 centuries. His directive paved the way for Commodore Matthew Perry's expedition, which would soon open Japanese ports to American trade and set the stage for more global United States. That spirit of principle carried on to the administration of Franklin Pierce, who brought quiet conviction to his presidency. In 1853, he became the first to affirm rather than swear his oath of office, this being on the basis of deep religious belief. Remarkably, he also delivered his entire inaugural address from memory. Then came James Buchanan, who was a lifelong bachelor whose presidency unfolded on the eve of the Civil War. With no wife to act as a first lady, his niece Harriet Lane stepped into that role. Buchanan had quite a number of firsts, with the other one being that he was the first former Secretary of State to become president. Have you heard of a US president that held a patent? That's Abraham Lincoln. A creator at heart, Lincoln had designed a device that lifted boats over river obstacles and went on to patent it successfully. He also had a rather sad first as a president, being the first president to be assassinated. He was assassinated at Ford's Theater in 1865 by stage actor John Wilkes Booth. His successor, Andrew Johnson, faced the impossible task of leading a nation through Reconstruction. Despite facing a turbulent period in office following Lincoln's death, he made history as the first president to be impeached by the House of Representatives, only to survive removal by a single vote. Then came Ulysses S. Grant, the stoic Civil War hero who carried his battlefield discipline into the presidency. Grant also achieved another first after being the first president to oversee the creation of America's first national park, Yellowstone. Although we're used to experiencing public inauguration, there was a time when one president took that oath privately. And that's Rutherford B. Hayes, who had to take his oath of office privately in the Red Room of the White House on March 3, 1877, 2 days before the ceremony, becoming the first commander-in-chief to be sworn in privately. The reason behind this? His election had been fiercely contested, and that discreet inauguration helped calm tensions in a deeply divided post-Civil War nation. And then James A. Garfield became the first sitting U.S. House member elected president. In addition to that, Garfield was ambidextrous, meaning that he could write Latin with one hand while writing Greek with the other. Unfortunately, he joined Lincoln in the list of presidents that have been assassinated while in office. Next stepped in Chester A. Arthur, who as president signed the landmark 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act, the first major federal law barring immigration from a specific country. Grover Cleveland made history as the only U.S. president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. Well, until the Donald came around. His return to power following an earlier defeat was sufficient proof that political comebacks were possible in American democracy. Next in line was Benjamin Harrison, who oversaw a different kind of transformation. In 1891, he was the occupant of the White House when the place came to life with electricity for the very first time. Yet it's said that the Harrisons were so wary of electric shocks that they often let the lights burn overnight rather than touch the switches. And then William McKinley came along and made history as the first U.S. president to ride in an automobile while in office. It was a steam-powered vehicle manufactured by the Stanley Motor Carriage Company of Massachusetts. He was also the first U.S. president to be assassinated in the 20th century. Theodore Roosevelt then made history as the first sitting U.S. president to travel abroad. This was after he made a journey to Panama in 1906 to inspect the construction of the Panama Canal. This journey was also seen as America's strategy of expanding its influence on the global stage. Roosevelt also became the first U.S. president to win the Nobel Peace Prize for brokering the end of the Russo-Japanese War. His successor, William Howard Taft, took a more measured but equally historic path. After leaving the White House, he went on to become Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, becoming the only person ever to lead both the executive and judicial branches of government. On the other hand, Woodrow Wilson became the first president to hold a Ph.D. Then, in 1922, Warren G. Harding became the first U.S. president to have his voice broadcast over the radio. For millions of Americans, it meant that the president's words could now reach homes across the nation instantly. Sadly, his unexpected death in 1923 brought his presidency to a sudden end. His successor was Calvin Silent Cal Coolidge, who took the oath of office in one of the most intimate scenes in American history. It happened by the soft glow of a kerosene lamp where his own father swore him in at their Vermont farmhouse. He also set the record as the first president whose inauguration was broadcast coast to coast. Moving on, Herbert Hoover became the first president born west of the Mississippi River. If there's a president that reshaped the very nature of American leadership, it's Franklin D. Roosevelt. He became the only president ever elected to 4 consecutive terms. FDR was also the first president inaugurated on January 20th after the ratification of the 20th Amendment, and the first to appoint a woman, Frances Perkins, to the cabinet. Following his death, Harry S. Truman stepped in and also attained a number of firsts, including being the first president to authorize the use of atomic weapons in a move that ended World War II. Then came Dwight D. Eisenhower, the revered five-star general who had once led the Allied forces to victory in Europe. His firsts include admitting Alaska and Hawaii as the 49th and 50th states, as well as becoming the first president to govern all 50 states. John F. Kennedy became the first president to take part in a televised debate with Richard Nixon. After his tragic assassination, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson took the oath of office aboard Air Force One, a somber first in American history. His swearing-in took place only about 2 hours after Kennedy's death, while Air Force One was still on the tarmac at Love Field Airport. Johnson also became the first president to have a woman, Judge Sarah T. Hughes, administer his presidential oath of office. While Johnson provided the much-needed sense of stability following JFK's death, his predecessor, Richard Nixon, did not have a smooth experience at the White House. Despite reopening relations with China, his presidency was tainted by the Watergate affair, which forced him to become the first and only president to resign. In the aftermath of Watergate and the subsequent resignation of Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford entered the presidency and with that became the only individual in America's history to serve as both vice president and president without ever being elected to either office. Following him, Jimmy Carter brought a very different kind of legacy, one that might never be challenged in a long time. He was the first president born in a hospital, this being perceived as a simple yet symbolic sign of how rapidly America was modernizing. The next person in the Oval Office was Ronald Reagan, who made history by appointing Sandra Day O'Connor as the first woman to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court as an Associate Justice. Reagan was also the first president who was a major Hollywood actor before taking office. Some of the notable films that he played in include Newt Rockney, All-American, and King's Row. America has also had a president that also served as director of the Central Intelligence Agency, and that's none other than George H.W. Bush, or the senior Bush for that matter. This made him the first and only president as of 2025 with direct experience in the world of espionage and global intelligence. His successor, Bill Clinton, became the first president whose inauguration was broadcast live on the internet in 1997. And then there was the junior Bush, who broke yet another mold by being the first president to hold a Master of Business Administration degree. Not to forget that his 2000 victory also made history as the first presidential election ever decided by the Supreme Court, following the dramatic recount battle in Florida. 2008 saw yet another historic first in the U.S. presidency. This is after Barack Obama, the first African American, was elected as president. Another first with Obama is that he was the first president born in Hawaii that's outside continental United States. After Obama completed his term, Donald Trump came in, the first president in U.S. history with neither military nor political experience. And finally, Joe Biden became the first president to have served over 35 years in the U.S. Senate. His inauguration also introduced a groundbreaking milestone, America's first female vice president, Kamala Harris. Remember to subscribe to the channel for more videos like this and check out this next video on how every US president died and their last words.